Hi, welcome to Code Conversations. We're continuing our conversation with Mads Torgersen. So before you showed us some really cool C#7 features, and now you're going to show us how those features are designed in the open?
Yeah, I think it's worth talking a little about how we arrive at these language features that come out every once in a while. And it's been, for C#, sort of classically, it was designed behind closed doors by Microsoft people in a room. And there were good things and bad things about that. The bad things were that we didn't design features in communication with the broader C# community. And so we didn't have maybe good input on what's actually most important, what are some scenarios that'll work better or worse with this design, and so on.
Right, okay.
So going open, we really have moved to a situation where we can have much more of a conversation with all the C# users and everyone who has an opinion, and as we go, as we design, get feedback. And so what we'll look at a little bit is the artifacts for that.
Great.
At the same time, a good thing was being in a room together and spending a lot of time face-to-face designing a language. And that's something that we've held on to. We still have a C# language design team that's about 8 people that meet 4 hours a week and actually go through the decisions and the different choices and try to get creative and assign the language there. So we try to strike a balance there.
Okay.
But the main way that we interact with the community in language design is that there's simply a repo for C# language design on GitHub.
Cool.
Okay, so there's a place that I have up here that is just a csharplang repo under the .NET organization.
Okay.
And the way this works is we have the source code in this repo is documents that pertain to language design. There's no actual implementation code. That happens in the Roslyn repo elsewhere.
Okay.
This is all about language design, and the output, the code, if you will, is design documents. And so if you think about what happens with a feature idea or proposal, typically it starts out in the issues section where there's a very active discussion. You can see here, if we just go to issues, there's, on this particular day, it's been a few days since one of us went through and tagged everything with labels consistently. But if you go down here, you can see we quickly go in and say, is this person discussing something, suggesting a feature, or is this an issue with the design and so on? And
okay. And this is public repo. Anyone can create an issue. And
absolutely.
Okay. And
anyone can comment on them. And so if we start, here's one by Miguel de Casa. That's great. He proposes dictionary literals. That'd be cool. So if we go look at that proposal, you see he has an idea for syntax for how to do dictionary literals. He proposes it, and people have opinions about it. Most people like it. It looks like there's discussion. Could we do this instead? What are some of the edge cases? Whatever. Okay. And based on these, anyone can just put a suggestion up there as an issue. And we get lots and lots of those, right? And so based on that, the language designers, we'll go through, and then occasionally we see something like, oh, we should probably do that. And I think I would do that with this one here. And then we decide that we want to champion it. And that means we go to the person who proposes it and says, could you submit a proposal as a pull request into the actual document tree? And then what happens is that somebody writes up a more formal proposal. We haven't gotten Miguel to do that for this one yet, but he writes up a more formal proposal. It goes into the proposals directory here, and here you can see sort of all the active proposals, all the things that have been proposed that we say this is worth discussing in the language design meeting and seeing if it has legs and refining over time. And then eventually it'll either get adopted and move on to another state. If it gets adopted in C#7.1, it'll end up in that directory, or we'll reject it, or maybe if it's just sits around for a long time, we'll archive it elsewhere. Okay, so we can go in and look at one. Let's look at Lambda attributes here. You can see there's a proposal that more formally describes.
I like that you have the checklist at the top.
And there's a checklist at the top that says what state is it in.
Yeah. Okay.
And on top of that, whoever on the language design team chose to champion this feature, there'll be an issue that tracks that championing, if you will. So here's a proposal champion label here. You can see all the things that are currently championed by design team members, and And again, they have a checklist that moves it through the process of writing the proposal in the first place, discussing it in the design meetings, and so on.
And if you're interested in one of these, then that's nice. You can follow that issue, right? And
yeah.
track it.
So this is one where there's not yet a proposal added, so it doesn't have a file in the directory we saw before yet, but that's the first checkbox. And then this will be discussed in LDM, which is short for Language Design Meeting. And so we meet up to 2 times a week, 2 hours at a time, and triage things that are championed, move forward the design of the features that are active, and so on. And the outcome of those meetings is a bunch of meeting notes, which I write up. And I try to keep up with. They always, I sit there in the meeting and I type some very messy notes, and I try to be, here's 2017 here, I try to put up even my raw, messy notes, swallow all pride, and just put up the gunky stuff here. So you see, here's a recent one that is just, it says raw notes, read at your own peril, right? But it'll have whatever I got on paper at that point. And then at some point later, and sometimes it's much later, but I try to make it not too much later when I have time, I'll go back and clean it up. And at that point, we'll put it in the README with a little summary of what it was about and a link to the cleaned up notes, which will then describe, all the things we discussed that day, what we decided, and so on.
Okay.
And so people can just go in and follow this in real time. As the artifacts are produced, people can go and follow, comment, influence us in various ways. And this is how, I think, this is as much of a window as we can give into the design process, and as much of a two-way conversation as it can be when we still have physical design meetings.
That's great. So people can all the way through, like someone outside the team, Miguel, proposes a feature, right? And then you go through and as you said, people can comment and they can watch all the way through to completion then.
Yeah. So if there is a problem with a feature, we will know for sure. And it works very well. It really helps us steer to the right decisions.
One nice thing with this too is you do have something written up along the way. You know what I mean? And so it's not like, as far as documentation, you've got something to start with early on, even as it's being implemented.
Right. And another thing that is really useful is that we have a record of the design intent and of the rationale for the reasons we took one path and not another.
Right.
And so when later someone says, why didn't we? Or why didn't we do it this way instead? We can actually often go back and see, well, that's why. Oh, now I remember. That's because it allocates too much, or that's because it's ambiguous syntax or whatever.
Yeah.
So it helps us not repeat the same mistakes too often.
Awesome. Okay, great. And we'll have a link to this in the show notes, and people can get involved.
Cool.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.